Joining me today is Mark Shapiro. Thank you very much. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell me a bit about your current position, your current work, and your background.
Yeah. So my name is Mark Shapiro. It's a weird thing. I pronounce my name a little bit differently than most people. There's a story behind that, but I'm the president and CEO of the Toronto Blue Jays. Had we had a season, this would have been my fifth season with the Blue Jays. Since becoming president of the Indians and with the Blue Jays, I oversee both the business and the baseball side. So that involves every aspect of that you would expect for a professional sports organization, including anything from building operations to marketing, communications, sales, community relations, but responsible for overall P&L, and the baseball side still reports into me as well. The only other thing to probably mention is I play a role, particularly with the Blue Jays at the league level. I'm on a variety of committees, from the competition committee to the long range strategic planning committee, and represent our ownership, which is a corporation. About 10 years experience on the business side, and then league side as well is something where I take a lot of time and energy and take a lot of pride in that work.
Great, thank you. Well, the theme of all of this is dealing with the post-pandemic world, and I'm sure a lot of this is fairly obvious coming from baseball about some of the challenges and major issues you guys are facing related to the pandemic. What are some of the big, I'll let you put it in your words, what are some of the big challenges we're thinking, maybe you're seeing, maybe even some of those that aren't as obvious to the outsiders? And really, have you guys identified, or have you identified any solutions going forward?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the largest challenges that probably impact the live entertainment business and the live entertainment world, equally the same. Certainly, baseball drives a large portion of our revenue from in-stadium ticketing and attendance. So anything like the unprecedented circumstances of the virus that we're dealing with now, that will certainly impact behaviors and people's comfort level of attending games in a stadium is going to have a drastic and major impact on our revenues. Our revenues obviously drive and fuel our business, everything from our player contracts, which is our biggest expense, to the infrastructure that leads to our decision making and everything else we do. So I would say this with all candor: the majority of my time and our time over the past 2 months has largely been triage, Doug. I mean, it's been like we're just literally like every single day trying to determine how we adapt the scenarios that will play out for 2020. The bulk of my time and energy has been spent on scenario planning and what this season looks like and how we adapt from literally March 14th being in a regular spring training game to all of a sudden we're on a plane back to Toronto.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a huge shock. I still remember when I was watching the NBA on that Wednesday night when they canceled the game, and it was interesting to hear him from the business side react to closing a game, not even ending or suspending the season. And one of his first comments was about the staff, and not the players necessarily, but how much their organization employs. It goes beyond the athletes you see on the field into a much, much bigger ripple effects. Lots of triage, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's what people, when they think about professional sports, they think of kind of the tip of the spear, and that's it. They think about the 25 players in the field and maybe the coaching staff and manager. In reality, especially in baseball, more than any other sport, we have got a significant organization and operation. Everything from 800 part-time and game day staff that help us put on a production, concessions, security, ticket takers, ushers, all of that group, to a business operation that's over a couple hundred people in Toronto, to an extensive scouting and player development staff. And really, like on the baseball side, the business is identify talent, acquire talent, develop talent, and then build a major league team, not just play major league games. So that development process, that identification process, is hundreds of people throughout all of North and Latin America and even Asia that are out there thinking about how do we bring in talent, how do we acquire talent, and then maybe the part that I'm most passionate about, how do we develop players to reach their full potential mentally, physically, and fundamentally. And side of our jobs has really grown exponentially over the past 4 to 5 years. We think about the high performance space in such a different way. So yes, you're talking about hundreds of people that grow into thousands, when we talk about games.
Well, so that's a good segue in some ways. So our research lab here, one of the things we focus on is the entrepreneurship and innovative, and really almost a lot of it's about talent development, and a lot of it's really forward-looking and looking for solutions. So I'm curious if you see any opportunities arising from this extended moment of crisis. What kind of opportunities might there be going forward?
I think, one, I'm of the mindset that whenever there's challenge, whenever there's an adversity, that successful people that achieve sustainable level of championship success are capable of turning, that adversity and those challenges into thinking about where the opportunities lie. The immediate opportunities in my mind have been in the ability to adapt, utilize technology, and perhaps build connectivity throughout the organization that may be even stronger now than when we were all focused on just physically doing our jobs day to day. And now there is so much emphasis on connectivity, so much emphasis on collaboration, so much emphasis on supporting each other and ensuring that we come out of this challenge stronger, that I've seen a learning and idea flow and iteration that is probably unlike any that we've ever had.
That's interesting. So I want to pick up on the notion of connectivity and really sort of community on that, because maybe it's the rise of mobile technology and the bigger changes. And a lot of that was coming in, especially in your sector before the pandemic, where the rise of fantasy sports and people using their phones and mobile devices to engage with the business and the activity. How do you see those trends or the future generally as it affects your industry and the work, and what kinds of things might be coming out of this, both on the internal sort of in-house production side, as you've already mentioned, but also then on the audience and sort of fan engagement side?
Well, what I would say is I think that, that had left, that cart had left the barn, that while this may actually spur that competition and that adaptation to happen at a faster rate, the reality is that the sports and entertainment landscape had already become way more fragmented than when I entered in years ago, way more mobile than it was even 10 years ago, and attention spans are far shorter than they were, yesterday, a month ago, 5 years ago. So the need for professional sports as leagues, as teams, as individual performers to think differently about how we present our product, our game and our product, to think about, how our fans consume our games, and really the experience they have in the stadium. So Doug, it's really a 360-degree experience. We need to think about how our games are distributed and consumed, how they're presented, how they are consumed in ballpark. And my biggest, and I could talk about this for an hour, but my biggest comment to you is that it really has to be a segmented and targeted approach. There is not a one-size-fits all. I think that's going to continue to evolve as we understand more about consumer behavior, as we understand more about who we're trying to attract and retain, and we build fan experiences and connectivity with our fans that are more personal, customized, and meant to both attract new fans and retain our existing fans.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think there's a lot of lessons that both the sort of arts and culture side and the sports world side can learn from each other, and there's a lot of shared challenges. So then here's the challenging question for you is, what do you see more long-term, how those trends might take a veer off in a different direction a little bit because of coronavirus pandemic style reactions and concerns, where now we're thinking not this season, maybe not even next season, but what kind of long-term impacts do you see down the road?
Well, I think if anything that the coronavirus and its short to midterm impact are probably going to accelerate some of the things that were already in course and already underway. So where do esports fit into the landscape? Where does gaming fit into the landscape and betting? How do we adapt user experience? How do we adapt our game, the actual way the game is played, to ensure that we, understand and appreciate shorter attention spans and interactivity within the game? So I think it'll probably force adaptivity at a faster rate than we were probably willing to consider. I think this will make the financial realities of the next 12 months, Doug, are probably going to make us think more seriously and consider more quickly adaptations and changes and evolution of our business that we probably were already considering and we were already heading towards.
No, I think that's an interesting point about how much of this really just accelerates things that were already in play. So one other question I've got is to think about some of the impacts that may be very much behind the scenes and almost more structural. We're going to have big financial fallout where you work, at least in the arts and culture sector, especially with all these smaller nonprofits dominating the area. They won't survive. And some of them will come back in different forms, but there's going to be major restructuring that happens. And I imagine in baseball, especially if you start looking at minor leagues and further down the pyramid, there may be some big sort of structural overhauls. In the big picture abstract, do you see any interesting trends and changes in those big kind of structural changes?
That's probably going to be more a reaction to a challenged business environment than it is maybe, the need to kind of change our game. And I do think it'll probably happen at levels where we are clearly suffering from a distressed business, and that'll be more clear at maybe the minor league level, where there'll be an evolution of how minor league baseball is presented that could actually result in a more efficient and even more positive environment for developing players, one that factors in player welfare. That system is relatively archaic, has not changed in 100 years, and probably is not the best way to develop players. So it could allow us to think more about player welfare, take into consideration some of the resources, facilities, and environments that we can potentially think about optimizing human performance differently than we did in the past.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you did also circle back to the talent development piece, because I think that's as interesting as, in some ways, audience engagement pieces, and how those two parts that are very similar are very relatable to the arts and culture sector. Well, I don't know, do you have any last thoughts on things we haven't touched on about where you think some of the future of this lies, the opportunities and other challenges that come out of all this?
Yeah, I think the challenges are going to be the same for all of us. How do we adapt, right size, restructure our business to exist in probably the next 1 to 3 years, as we all recognize that the path back is not going to be a quick one. And although I am as optimistic and bullish and hopeful that it will come back, that it will be an important part of our entertainment experience, that live entertainment and sports will be a big part of the experience, because people still crave community and still, are desirous of being in those settings, that I think it's going to take time. And in the interim, the question is going to be, do organizations, do ownership, do leaders retreat into fear and short-term reactivity to those challenges, or do they do the best they can to make people-first decisions that still provide a foundation for long-term opportunities that, although they may be varied, as we talked about earlier, because we were certainly already on a course that, of dealing with a changing landscape in sports and entertainment, but will still be full of plenty of opportunity and plenty of business for all of us that work in the entertainment and sports industries and the arts and entertainment industries. It's just keeping an open mind about what that looks like, staying, ensuring that we stay relevant, and ensuring we stay really humble, open-minded, and learning, wherever the opportunities provide themselves, and agile enough to move there.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it, and we look forward to having you join us later in the afternoon on Monday for the roundtable discussion.
I'm looking forward to being with everybody and learning with everybody as well.